You know what the biggest joke in the galaxy is? The fact that every species out there thought they had us humans figured out. Yeah, right? Tell that to Captain Rex Morrison as he stepped out of the shimmering temporal displacement field, his boots hitting the metal deck of the Galactic Council's most secure facility with a satisfying thud that echoed through the chamber like a death knell. Well, Rex muttered, adjusting his tactical vest and checking his plasma rifle's charge indicator. Looks like the cat's finally out of the bag, isn't it? The alien delegation before him froze. And I mean completely, utterly frozen. Like someone had hit the pause button on reality itself. Their compound eyes, tentacles, and various appendages that I won't even try to describe all turned toward this lone human who had just materialized out of thin air in their most classified meeting room. Ambassador Crix 9, the lead negotiator from the Centauri Collective, was the first to recover. His voice came out as a series of clicks and hisses that the universal translator struggled to process. This is impossible. Temporal manipulation technology does not exist. The laws of physics prohibit such advancement. Rex let out a laugh that could have powered a small space station. Oh, buddy, you sweet, naive little bug creature. You really think we have been sitting on our hand for the past 50 years while you have been treating us like we are barely out of the Stone Age? The human leaned against the conference table, his casual demeanor a stark contrast to the panic that was starting to ripple through the room like wildfire. Behind him, the temporal field crackled once more, and out stepped Dr. Lisa Grant, the lead scientist of Project Kronos, carrying a device that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and held together with pure human stubbornness. Rex, you are enjoying this way too much, Lisa said, though the grin on her face suggested she was having just as much fun. But we do have a schedule to keep. Schedule. The voice belonged to General Thane Korvik of the Draconian Empire, whose scaled features had gone from their usual emerald green to a rather alarming shade of pale yellow. What schedule? What is the meaning of this intrusion? Lisa activated her device, and suddenly the air around them shimmered with holographic displays showing temporal coordinates, energy readings, and what appeared to be a complete map of space-time itself. Well, General, since you asked so nicely, we are here to discuss the rather significant oversight in your recent peace negotiations. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. You could practically hear the collective gulp of every alien species represented at that table. They'd been discussing humanity's future without humanity present, thinking they were dealing with a primitive species that had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. Boy, were they wrong. You see, Rex continued, his voice taking on that particular tone that humans use right before they drop a bombshell that reshapes entire worldviews. While you have all been playing your little political games and carving up the galaxy like it's some kind of cosmic birthday cake, we have been busy solving the one problem that stumped every civilization since the dawn of time itself. Time travel. Lisa added helpfully, as if she was discussing the weather. We cracked it about 15 years ago. Took us another 10 to perfect it, and the last 5 to weaponize it. The silence that followed could have been measured in geological ages. You know that moment in old Earth movies when the record player scratches to a halt? This was like that, but multiplied by the population of several dozen star systems. Commander Zeph Nakamura chose that moment to make his entrance through the temporal field, followed by what appeared to be an entire squad of human temporal operatives. Each one carried equipment that would have made the most advanced alien technologies look like children's toys. Sorry we are late, Zeph announced with the kind of casual confidence that only comes from knowing you hold all the cards in a game where everyone else thought they were playing checkers. Had to make a quick stop in the year 2157 to prevent the Andromedans from developing their own time travel program. Messy business that. Ambassador Crix 9's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. This is a violation of every treaty, every agreement, every understanding between our civilizations. What agreements? Rex asked, his eyebrows raised in mock surprise. You mean the ones you were planning to make without consulting us? The ones where humanity gets relegated to some backwater colonies while you divide up Earth's resources among yourselves? Dr. Grant stepped forward, her expression shifting from amused to deadly serious. We know about the Proxima Accords. We know about the Resource Allocation Protocol. We know about every single one of your little schemes because, and here's the really fun part, we have already lived through the timeline where you succeed. The implications hit the assembled aliens like a freight train traveling at light speed. If humans had already experienced those futures, if they'd already lived through the consequences of these secret negotiations, then they knew exactly what was being planned in this very room. Timeline 4A7, Zeph added, consulting a device on his wrist. Humanity gets pushed out of the galactic community, relegated to a handful of agricultural worlds, while our homeworld becomes a mining operation for rare Earth elements. Timeline 6B2. We become a client species, essentially slaves with better housing. Timeline 12C9. Outright extinction after we prove too troublesome to control. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. General Korvic's scales had now shifted to a sickly gray color. You're claiming you have witnessed multiple futures. Witnessed? Oh no, General. Lisa laughed, and there was nothing pleasant about the sound. We live them. Every single horrible, oppressive, genocidal one of them. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your entire species get wiped out? To see your children turned into slaves? To witness the complete destruction of everything you hold dear? Rex picked up where she left off, his voice growing harder with each word. We do, because we have experienced it. Multiple times. And each time, we learned something new. Each time, we got a little bit better at this whole time travel thing. Commander Nakamura activated his own device, and suddenly the room filled with images. Scenes of human colonies burning, of Earth cities reduced to strip mines, of human children being trained as servants for alien masters. The assembled delegates watched in horrified fascination as timeline after timeline played out before them. This is Timeline 23F1, Zeph narrated calmly. This is where the Centauri Collective decides that human creativity is too dangerous and implements mandatory neural dampening fields. Spoiler alert, it doesn't end well for anyone involved. And this, Lisa added, switching to another set of images, is Timeline 45G3, where the Draconian Empire attempts to use humans as biological weapons in their war against the Vegan Confederacy. Plot twist. We don't stay loyal to our masters for very long. The aliens were beginning to understand the magnitude of what they were facing. This wasn't just first contact with a species that had developed time travel. This was contact with a species that had used time travel to live through every possible future, to experience every form of oppression and extinction that could be inflicted upon them. Ambassador Crix. 9 finally found his voice. What do you want? Rex smiled. And it was the kind of smile that had probably terrified predators back when humans were still living in caves. What do we want? That's the beautiful part. We don't want anything from you. We already have everything we need, Lisa continued. Every piece of technology you have developed, we have already reverse engineered in one timeline or another. Every strategic advantage you think you possess, we have already countered in multiple scenarios. Every secret you think you are keeping, Zeph added, we already know, because in some timeline, somewhere, somewhen, one of you has already told us. The realization was dawning on the assembled delegates like a particularly unpleasant sunrise. They weren't negotiating with a primitive species. They were sitting across from beings who had essentially become temporal gods, who had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations across countless timelines. General Korvic leaned back in his chair, his military mind trying to process the tactical implications. If you have all this power, why are you here? Why not simply eliminate us from the timeline? Because, Rex said, his expression softening slightly. Despite what you might think about us humans, we are not monsters. We could erase you from existence. We could prevent your species from ever evolving. We could rewrite history so that you never developed spaceflight, never left your homeworlds, never became a threat to us or anyone else. But we won't, Lisa added, because that's not who we are. That's not who we choose to be. Commander Nakamura stepped forward, his presence commanding attention even in a room full of beings who controlled star systems. Instead, we are offering you something unprecedented in galactic history. A chance to coexist with a species that has seen every possible future and chosen the path of cooperation over domination. Think about it, Rex said, beginning to pace around the conference table like a predator circling its prey. We could rule this galaxy. We could make ourselves gods. We could reshape reality itself to suit our whims. But instead, we are here in this room talking to you, offering you a partnership instead of demanding your surrender. The silence stretched on for what felt like eons. The alien delegates exchanged glances, their various forms of communication creating a subtle symphony of clicks, hisses, and electromagnetic pulses as they try to process this paradigm shift, Dr. Grant cleared her throat. Of course, this offer comes with certain conditions. And there it was, the other shoe dropping like a meteor impact. Every alien in the room leaned forward, waiting for the hammer to fall. First, she continued, no more secret meetings about humanity's future without human representation. We have lived through enough timelines to know how that story ends. And spoiler alert, nobody likes the ending. Second, Rex added, full disclosure of all current military capabilities, research projects, and territorial expansion plans. We already know most of it anyway, but it's the principle of the thing. Third, Zeph said, establishment of a joint temporal monitoring system. Because believe it or not, you're not the only species in the galaxy that's been trying to crack time travel. And some of the others? Let's just say they make your worst-case scenarios look like bedtime stories for children. Ambassador Crix-9's voice was barely above a whisper. And if we refuse? The three humans exchanged glances, and for a moment, the temperature in the room seemed to plummet to absolute zero. Well, Rex said finally, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had witnessed the destruction of civilizations. We go back to timeline 1 and start over. Except this time, we don't bother with a diplomatic approach. The message was clear. Humanity had already won this war before it had even begun. They had fought it across multiple timelines, learned from every defeat, adapted to every strategy their enemies could devise. They were offering peace not from a position of weakness, but from a position of such overwhelming strength that resistance was quite literally futile. How long do we have to decide? General Korvik asked, his military training finally kicking in despite the impossibility of the situation. Lisa consulted her temporal device. Well, considering that in timeline 67H4, this meeting ends with you attempting to take us hostage, and in timeline 89J2, it ends with the Centauri fleet opening fire on this station. I'd say you have exactly 7 minutes and 33 seconds before we get bored and decide to try a different approach. 7 minutes and 32 seconds, Rex corrected helpfully. Actually, Zeph added, checking his own chronometer, make that 7 minutes and 29 seconds. Time really does fly when you're having fun. The alien delegates erupted into frantic discussion, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that would have been incomprehensible to anyone who hadn't spent decades studying xenolinguistics across multiple timelines, the doctor. Grant turned to her companions with a satisfied expression. I have to admit, this is considerably more entertaining than timeline 23A5, where they just started shooting immediately. Or timeline 45C7, Rex added, where they tried to surrender before we even finished explaining the situation. My personal favorite was timeline 78D1, Zeph chimed in. They offered to make us their gods. That was awkward. And as the clock continued to tick down, humanity waited patiently for the rest of the galaxy to catch up to a simple truth that had taken them dozens of timelines to learn. Sometimes, the best way to win a war is to make sure it never has to be fought at all. The future, as they say, was about to become very interesting indeed. The countdown reached zero with all the subtlety of a supernova explosion. Time's up, Rex announced cheerfully, though his hand had somehow found its way to his sidearm. So what's it going to be? Door number 1, cooperation and mutual prosperity. Door number 2, we reset the timeline and try a more direct approach. Ambassador Crix-9 stepped forward, his chitinous exoskeleton making soft clicking sounds with each movement. We accept your terms. Just like that, Lisa raised an eyebrow. No committee meetings? No consultation with your respective governments? No dramatic last-minute betrayals? Dr. Grant, General Korvik interjected, his scales shifting to a resigned shade of bronze. When you have just learned that your opposition has already lived through every possible outcome of this negotiation, traditional diplomacy becomes somewhat pointless. Zeph nodded approvingly. Smart lizard. Though I have to say, this is refreshingly anticlimactic compared to Timeline 156K9, where the entire station exploded during negotiations. Or Timeline 203M4, Rex added, where it turned out the Centauri had been replaced by shape-shifting parasites halfway through the meeting. The aliens exchanged nervous glances. Just how many timelines had these humans experienced? Dr. Grant activated a new holographic display, showing what appeared to be a three-dimensional map of space-time itself. Now that we have got the pleasantries out of the way, let's discuss the real problem. Real problem. Ambassador Crix-9's voice climbed several octaves. What could possibly be worse than learning that humanity has mastered time travel? Oh, buddy, Rex laughed, but there was no humor in it this time. You think we are the only species that's been playing with temporal mechanics? You sweet, innocent little bug. We are just the only ones who have been responsible about it. The hologram shifted, revealing a complex web of temporal distortions spreading across the galaxy like cracks in a windshield. Meet the Nexus Collective, Lisa said grimly. They are from approximately 8,000 years in the future, and they have been systematically unraveling the timeline to prevent their own extinction. General Korvik leaned forward, his military instincts kicking in. What destroyed them in their original timeline? Us, Zeph said simply. Well, not us specifically, but the alliance that forms between humanity and, well, pretty much everyone in this room. Turns out, when you combine human creativity with Centauri mathematics and draconian engineering, you get technologies that even 8,000-year-old civilizations find threatening. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a temporal shockwave. They weren't just dealing with human time travelers. They were caught in the middle of a temporal war between present-day cooperation and future-born desperation. So let me get this straight, Ambassador Crix-9 said slowly. In the original timeline, our species work together, become incredibly advanced, and somehow threaten a civilization from 8,000 years in the future. Bingo, Rex confirmed. And their solution? Go back in time and prevent that alliance from ever forming. They have been subtly manipulating events for decades, arranging conflicts between species, ensuring that cooperation never develops, keeping everyone isolated and weak. Lisa pulled up another display showing temporal interference patterns. Remember the vegan wars? The Andromedan plague? The great silence of Sector 7? All of them engineered by Nexus agents working backwards through time. The irony is delicious, Zeph continued. They're so afraid of what we might become together that they are willing to destroy the very timeline that created them in the first place. Talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. General Korvik's scales had shifted to a deep red, the draconian equivalent of battle readiness. How do we fight an enemy that attacks us from the future? That's where things get interesting, Rex said, his grin returning. See, the Nexus Collective made one crucial mistake. They assumed the humans would be just as susceptible to temporal manipulation as everyone else. But we are not, Lisa added. Something about human neural architecture makes us naturally resistant to timeline alterations. We remember things that have been erased. We retain knowledge from deleted timelines. We are essentially temporal anchors. The alien delegates stared at the humans with a mixture of awe and terror. Not only had humanity mastered time travel, but they were apparently immune to its most dangerous effects. Which brings us to our real proposition, Zeph said, his expression growing serious. We are not just offering you alliance. We are offering you protection from an enemy you didn't even know existed, fighting a war you weren't aware was being waged. Ambassador Crix-9's mandibles clicked rapidly. What exactly are you proposing? Dr. Grant waved her hand, and the holographic display shifted to show what appeared to be a massive space station, bristling with technology that defied easy description. Temporal Fortress Alpha, a base of operations that exists outside normal space-time, immune to timeline alterations and causality loops. We have already built it, Rex explained. Or rather, we will build it, have built it, and are currently building it. Temporal grammar is tricky. From this base, Lisa continued, we can coordinate a defense against Nexus incursions across multiple timelines simultaneously. But we need your help. Each species brings unique capabilities to the fight. General Korvik stood, his full height impressive even by draconian standards. What kind of capabilities? Centauri mathematics for calculating temporal coordinates, Zeph explained. Draconian engineering for building weapons that function across multiple timelines. Vegan biotechnology for creating life forms that can exist in temporal flux. The list goes on. And if we refuse? Ambassador Crix, 9 asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Then the Nexus wins, Rex said simply. They succeed in keeping us all isolated and weak. Your species never advance beyond their current levels. Humanity remains confined to a single star system. And 8,000 years from now, the Nexus Collective never has to worry about facing a united galaxy. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the stunned silence of beings confronting the impossible. This was the contemplative silence of military leaders and diplomats calculating odds and considering strategies. Lisa activated another display, this one showing battle scenes across multiple timelines. This is what the war looks like. Nexus agents infiltrating historical events. Temporal assassins targeting key figures before they can make crucial discoveries. Entire civilizations being erased from existence because they might contribute to future technologies. We have been fighting this war for subjective decades, Zeph added. But from your perspective, it's just beginning. The question is, do you want to fight it as allies? Or do you want to fight it all? Ambassador Crix, 9, turned to his fellow delegates. I believe we need to discuss this among ourselves. Of course, Rex said agreeably. Take all the time you need. We will just be over here, preventing the complete unraveling of causality. As the aliens huddled together in urgent discussion, the 3 humans exchanged glances. Think they will go for it? Lisa whispered. Timeline 847b. 3 says yes, Zeph replied quietly. But then again, Timeline 847b. 3 also featured talking dolphins as the dominant species on Earth, so maybe we shouldn't put too much stock in that one. My money's on the Draconians being the first to commit, Rex murmured. Military minds always recognize a good strategic opportunity when they see one. As if summoned by his words, General Korvik broke away from the group discussion. I have a question about these temporal weapons you mentioned. Shoot, Lisa said. Are they effective against beings who exist outside normal space-time? Zeph's eyes lit up. Very. Though the real trick is hitting targets that haven't been born yet, but are currently trying to kill your ancestors. In that case, the general said formally, the Draconian Empire pledges its full support to this alliance. One by one, the other delegates followed suit. The Centauri Collective, despite their cautious nature, recognized the mathematical elegance of the proposed solution. The Vegan Confederacy saw the biological implications of temporal warfare. Even the notoriously independent Andromedan Republic agreed to contribute their unique expertise in quantum mechanics. Excellent, Dr. Grant said, her device already calculating temporal coordinates. In that case, welcome to the Temporal Defense Coalition. Your first mission briefing is scheduled for yesterday. Yesterday, Ambassador Crix, 9 looked confused. Time travel, remember? Rex grinned. We have been fighting this war for decades. From your perspective, you are just joining. From ours, you have been valuable allies for years. The temporal field activated once more, but this time it was different. Instead of the localized distortion that had brought the humans to this meeting, space itself seemed to fold inward, revealing a corridor of pure light that stretched into infinity. After you, Zeph gestured toward the portal. Don't worry about the sensation of your atoms being scattered across multiple dimensions. That's completely normal. As the mixed group of humans and aliens stepped through the temporal gateway, Rex couldn't help but chuckle. You know what the best part about this whole situation is? What's that? Lisa asked, though she was already smiling. The Nexus Collective spent 8,000 years planning how to defeat a united galaxy. But they never considered what would happen if that galaxy was united by the threat of the Nexus Collective itself. General Korvik, who was rapidly adapting to the bizarre nature of temporal warfare, nodded approvingly. A self-defeating prophecy. They created the very alliance they sought to prevent. Welcome to fighting humans, Zeph called back to the alien delegates as they traversed the impossible corridor between moments. We specialize in turning our enemies' plans against them. The journey through the temporal gateway felt like falling upward through liquid starlight. Reality folded and unfolded around them like origami made of pure possibility. And then, suddenly, they were somewhere else. Someone else. Temporal Fortress Alpha was everything the holographic displays had promised and more. It existed in a pocket of stabilized space-time, a massive structure that seemed to be built from crystallized light and weaponized mathematics. Ships from dozens of species moved through docking bays that shouldn't have been able to exist, while beings from multiple timelines worked side by side on technologies that defied conventional physics. Home sweet home, Rex announced as they stepped on the main deck. Built in the year 2387, 1274, 4629, and next Tuesday, depending on which calendar you're using. Ambassador Crix, 9 looked around in wonder. This is incredible. How many timelines contributed to its construction? All of them, Lisa replied matter-of-factly. That's the advantage of temporal engineering. When you can access every possible timeline, you can combine the best innovations from each one. A figure approached them from across the vast command center. Human in appearance, but somehow more, as if she existed in more dimensions than the standard 3. Welcome, new allies. I'm Admiral Catherine Voss, commanding officer of Temporal Defense Operations. Admiral Voss has been fighting the Nexus for longer than most civilizations have existed, Zeph explained. She's experienced more timelines than the rest of us combined. Flattery will get you everywhere, Commander, the Admiral replied with a smile that contained galaxies. But right now, we have more pressing concerns. The Nexus has accelerated their timeline disruption program. They're no longer content with subtle manipulations. She gestured to a massive display showing temporal distortions across known space. They're attempting to create a cascade failure. If they succeed, causality itself will collapse, and reality will revert to a state of pure entropy. In other words, Rex translated for the alien delegates, they're trying to end the universe rather than risk losing this war. General Korvik's scales had shifted to a color that probably didn't exist in normal space-time. Can they succeed? Not while we exist to stop them. Admiral Voss replied with the kind of confidence that comes from having already won this war in several timelines. But we will need every advantage we can get. The final battle isn't just about defeating the Nexus. It's about preserving the very concept of existence itself. Ambassador Crix, 9 looked at his fellow delegates, then back at the humans who had just upended everything they thought they knew about the universe. What do you need us to do? What you do best, Dr. Grant said simply. The Centauri will calculate the mathematics of reality stabilization. The Draconians will engineer weapons that can fire backwards through time. The vegans will develop biotechnology that can exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. And humanity, General Korvik asked that Rex's grin was sharp enough to cut through space-time itself. We will do what we have always done. We will be the crazy species that refuses to give up, even when the universe itself is trying to end. Admiral Voss nodded approvingly. The Nexus Collective spent 8,000 years preparing for this war. They have technology that can rewrite reality, weapons that exist in pure concept, and the accumulated knowledge of civilizations that won't be born for millennia. But they made one crucial error, she continued. They underestimated the one thing that makes humanity truly special in this universe? Our stubbornness. Ambassador Crix, 9 suggested. Our refusal to accept that anything is impossible, Lisa corrected. Every other species in the galaxy has limits. Lines they won't cross, rules they won't break, realities they won't question. But humans? We look at the impossible and say, hold my beer. And as the newly formed Temporal Defense Coalition prepared for a war that would be fought across every timeline that had ever existed or ever could exist, one thing became clear. The universe was about to learn why humanity had earned its reputation as the species that could find a way to win any war, no matter how hopeless the odds appeared. Future, all possible futures, hung in the balance. But for the first time since the Nexus Collective had begun their temporal assault, the defenders of reality had something the attackers lacked: the unshakable human conviction that some things are worth fighting for, even if you have to break the laws of physics to do it. The war for existence itself was about to begin, and humanity had just taught the galaxy how to fight back. Time would tell if it would be enough. Actually, time had already told them. They just had to make sure it happened. But before anyone could take their next breath, alarms began blaring throughout Temporal Fortress Alpha. The sound was unlike anything the alien delegates had ever heard. It seemed to echo from past, present, and future simultaneously. Well, that's not good, Rex muttered, checking his temporal scanner. Nexus Incursión, Sector 7 Alpha. They are not wasting any time. Admiral Voss was already moving, her form seeming to blur as she accessed command interfaces that existed in multiple dimensions. All stations, this is not a drill. We have confirmed Nexus collective forces attempting to establish a temporal beachhead in the Sol system, circa 2157. The Sol system? Ambassador Crix 9's voice cracked. That's humanity's home system. Exactly, Dr. Grant said grimly, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. They are going for the nuclear option. If they can prevent humanity from developing interstellar travel, none of this ever happens. General Korvik stepped forward, his military bearing evident even in the face of the impossible. What can we do to help? Everything, Admiral Voss replied. Commander Morrison, take Alpha Squadron and establish a temporal perimeter. Dr. Grant, I need you to calibrate the reality stabilizers. Commander Nakamura, prep the paradox engines. What about us? The Draconian general pressed. Zeph turned to face the alien delegates, his expression deadly serious. You are about to get your first lesson in temporal warfare. And fair warning, it's going to hurt. The next few minutes were a blur of activity that seemed to take place in 17 dimensions at once. The alien delegates found themselves assigned to various stations throughout the fortress, their unique abilities immediately put to use in ways they'd never imagined. Ambassador Crix, 9 found himself working alongside a Centauri mathematician who had been dead for 3 centuries but was very much alive in this timeline, calculating probability matrices that would make quantum physicists weep. I don't understand, he admitted as numbers that shouldn't exist flowed across his screen. How can we be fighting in a time period that occurred before most of us were born? Temporal Mechanics 101, his partner explained cheerfully. When you fight a war across time, past and future become relative concepts. That battle in 2157, from our perspective, it's happening right now. From the perspective of the people in 2157, it either already happened, is currently happening, or will never happen, depending on whether we win or lose. Meanwhile, General Korvik found himself in the fortress's engineering section, working with technologies that his military mind told him couldn't possibly function, but were undeniably doing exactly that. This weapon, he said to the human technician beside him, it fires backwards through time. Among other things, the tech replied, the tricky part isn't shooting into the past. The tricky part is making sure you don't accidentally shoot yourself before you are born. That really ruins your whole day. Back on the command deck, Admiral Voss was coordinating a battle that spanned centuries. Rex, I need you to take your team to timeline 445. See and prevent the Nexus from assassinating Newton. If they succeed in stopping the development of classical physics, the cascade effects will make reality very unhappy, Rex finished. Got it. One protected Isaac Newton, coming right up. As he and his team stepped through another temporal portal, Ambassador Crix, 9, couldn't help but call out, "How is any of this possible?" Dr. Grant looked up from her calculations, her expression almost pitying. "You're still thinking in terms of linear causality. The Nexus gave up on that limitation 8,000 years ago. So did we." The battle, when it came, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Ships appeared and vanished across centuries. Weapons fired at targets that wouldn't exist for decades, and entire star systems flickered in and out of reality like cosmic strobe lights. Through it all, the human members of the Temporal Defense Coalition moved with a confidence that bordered on madness. They fought enemies in the Stone Age with weapons from the far future, defended medieval castles with orbital bombardments, and somehow made it all seem perfectly reasonable. "This is insane," General Korvac muttered as he watched a display showing human soldiers fighting robotic assassins in what appeared to be ancient Rome. "Welcome to fighting alongside humans," Admiral Voss replied with grim satisfaction. "We gave up on sanity around the same time we figured out how to punch holes in space-time." The turning point came when Ambassador Crix, 9, working frantically with the Centauri mathematicians, discovered something that had been hidden in the probability matrices. "Admiral," he called out, "I have found something. The Nexus Collective. They are not from our future at all." The command deck fell silent, except for the background hum of reality-bending technology. "What do you mean?" Dr. Grant asked, her voice tight with concentration. "According to these calculations, they are from a parallel timeline that was destroyed by temporal paradoxes. They have been jumping between realities, trying to find one where they can exist without causing causality loops." Admiral Voss's expression shifted from grim determination to something that might have been sympathy. "They are refugees, temporal refugees, trying to find a timeline where they won't cease to exist. Refugees who are willing to destroy entire realities to save themselves," General Korvac pointed out. "Exactly like humans would do." Rex's voice came through the communication system from wherever or whenever he was fighting. "Which means we know exactly how to beat them." "How?" Multiple voices asked simultaneously. "We offer them what they really want," Rex replied, his voice crackling through temporal interference. "A home, a timeline where they can exist without destroying everything else." The idea was so simple, so elegant, and so completely human that it took everyone a moment to process it. "You want to negotiate with beings who have been trying to erase us from existence?" Ambassador Crix, 9, asked. "I want to give them what they need so they will stop trying to erase us from existence," Rex corrected. "There's a difference." Admiral Voss was already running calculations on her command interface. "It could work. We create a stable pocket timeline, isolated from the main reality stream. They get to exist, we get to exist, everybody wins. Except for the part where they have been waging temporal war against US for decades," General Korvac objected. "Which is exactly why it has to be us who offers them mercy," Dr. Grant said quietly. "Any other species would hold that grudge forever. But humans? We specialize in impossible forgiveness." The next hour was spent in frantic preparation. The Temporal Defense Coalition worked together to create something that had never been attempted before, a completely isolated timeline branch that could support an entire civilization without affecting the main reality stream. When a Nexus Collective finally responded to their offer, the voice that came through the communication system was filled with exhaustion that spanned millennia. "You would offer us sanctuary? After everything we have done, we are offering you what every species deserves," Admiral Voss replied. "A chance to exist without destroying others in the process." The silence that followed stretched across centuries. Finally, the Nexus voice returned. "Why?" Rex's answer came from the temporal battlefield, where he was still fighting their forces. "Because holding grudges is exhausting, and we have got better things to do with our time." No pun intended. The war ended not with a bang, but with the most improbable sound in the universe. The collective sigh of relief from beings who had been fighting for so long they'd forgotten what peace felt like, as the Nexus forces began withdrawing to their newly created timeline sanctuary, Ambassador Crix. 9 turned to Admiral Voss. I have to ask, was this your plan all along? The Admiral smiled, and for the first time, she looked entirely human. Honestly, we were making it up as we went along. That's the most human thing about us. We are really good at improvising solutions to impossible problems. General Korvik shook his head in amazement. Your species ended a temporal war by offering your enemies exactly what they needed to stop fighting. It's not the first time, Dr. Grant said with a shrug. Probably won't be the last either. As the Temporal Defense Coalition began the complex process of stabilizing the timelines and ensuring that reality would continue to exist in a reasonably coherent fashion, Rex finally returned from his mission to protect Isaac Newton. How'd it go? Zeph asked. Oh, saved classical physics, prevented the heat death of the universe, convinced Newton that the robot assassins were just a particularly vivid dream. Tuesday stuff. Ambassador Crix. 9 looked around at the strange alliance that had formed in the face of an impossible threat. Humans who treated time travel like a minor inconvenience. Aliens who had learned to fight battles in centuries where they didn't exist, and former enemies who were now building new homes in pocket dimensions. What happens now? He asked. Admiral Voss gestured toward the massive displays showing the galaxy. All timelines, all possibilities, all the infinite potential futures that were once again free to unfold naturally. Now, she said, we go back to the really hard job, which is... Rex grinned, and it was the same expression he'd worn when he first stepped out of that temporal portal in the Galactic Council chambers. Figuring out how to live up to our reputation. And as the Temporal Defense Coalition dispersed back to their respective times and places, carrying with them the knowledge that the universe was a far stranger and more wonderful place than they'd ever imagined. One truth remained constant across all timelines. When faced with an impossible situation, humanity's first instinct wasn't to fight or flee. It was to find a way to make everyone win. Even time itself seemed to approve, flowing just a little bit smoother as reality settled back into its natural rhythm, enriched by the knowledge that somewhere in some timeline, the most dangerous war in history had ended with the simple recognition that everyone, even your worst enemies, deserved a chance to call somewhere home. The future, as it turned out, was going to be just fine. All of them.